This is a 2021 Subaru Outback. Now, you've probably seen videos of this car before, mainly because it's been out on sale in the US for over a year, but finally it's come to Australian shores. To say the Outback is an important model for Subaru would be a bit of an understatement. This is the second best selling car in the lineup underneath the Forester, so the stakes are high for Subaru to get this right. In the US, you can get the Outback with a 2.4-litre turbocharged four-cylinder engine. Now, we wanted that in Australia. We asked Subaru. No, in fact, we begged Subaru. You sounded your voice out loud. You made yourself heard that we wanted the turbo. And did we win? Did we succeed? No. Subaru decided to bring just one engine option to Australia, that being the 2.5-litre four-cylinder engine, which pushes out 128 kilowatts of power and 245 newton meters of torque. We'll see how well that performs later in the video. Climbing on board, the first thing you're going to notice in the new Outback is just how much more upscale the interior feels. There's a lot more leather-like surfaces and contrasting stitching, and it brings up the entire feeling of the cabin. Now, I'm going to address what you're probably looking at right now, and that is the infotainment system. This is an 11.6-inch portrait-style screen. It is huge. It's almost like the Outback designers had a look at the new Mercedes-Benz S-Class and thought, how do we do this but on a budget? And it looks really nice, and it's a central talking point of the car, especially when passengers first climb on board. Whilst pretty much all the car's functions are driven through this infotainment system, Subaru have kept the basic functionality physical. So there are physical volume, tuning knobs, and temperature controls. Excellent. It's not just more convenient, but it's actually safer on the road because using tactile switches is much better than trying to fiddle with a touchscreen whilst you're driving. Now, a lot of car manufacturers are moving to this large portrait orientation screens, mainly because they mimic your smartphone and tablet, so they're pretty easy to use and to get familiar with. This Starlink infotainment system is an app-based, so all your apps are here. You can rearrange them like you can on your smartphone by holding them down. And all the functions that you would expect are here. So in terms of radio, AM, FM, digital radio as well. If you use Apple CarPlay, with a recent update, the CarPlay actually fills most of the screen. So it makes it easier to use and easier to see. If you have an Android phone, then you're going to have to live with the fact that it only fills up a small portion of the display and it leaves the rest blank. In terms of the speed and response, it's a capacitive touchscreen, so it's pretty good. The processor could be a little bit faster. You can see when I'm zooming in on the maps, there is a bit of delay, but for everyday navigation, it's fine. This system does have its quirks. In the settings, you can tell it when your anniversary is, and you can input friends and family's birthdays as well. In fact, there's so many different settings to delve in with. We'd probably need an entire separate video just on this system. The Outback also has facial recognition, so you can scan up to 5 faces and it will greet you when you first enter the car. And when you start it up, all your personal preferences are loaded to the vehicle. For instance, your radio presets and your favorites and so forth. With the facial scanning system, it also has driver attention alert, so it will alert you if you're not paying attention to the road, which brings me to the point that pretty much every single safety feature you could imagine is standard on the Outback. And with lane centering and adaptive cruise control, the car can pretty much drive itself on the freeway, but of course, keep your hands on the wheel. Now, on to some things that I'm not a big fan of. Starting with the seatbelts. Subaru has always been a bit funny in the fact that it almost looks like it's unfinished. They don't put a cover on the back. Also, the shape of the seatbelt makes it quite awkward to grab. Also, the headrest adjuster on the button, when you push it, out pops out an extremely sharp piece of plastic. So just be careful that you don't cut yourself on it. All right, chode test time. This is where I have a big 1-litre Gatorade bottle and we try to test out cabin storage to see if it'll fit. So on the driver's door bin, no, unfortunately. In the center cup holders, they are huge, but just not quite big enough to take the bottle. Armrest, no. Glove box, yes, but that's only 1 out of 4. So unfortunately, the Outback fails. Climbing into the back seats, let's start with space. So I have this driver's seat set for my driving position. Regular viewers will know I'm 6'3" or 190 centimeters, otherwise known as tall. And I fit behind myself quite comfortably. I have enough toe room, enough knee room, and enough headroom. So I'd be pretty happy to do a long distance journey in the back of the Outback. Also, the seats are laid in a stadium style position. What that means is the rear seats are higher than the front, which gives kids and other people a good view out the front, less likely to get car sick. Also, the rear windows are massive with a low belt line, so kids should be able to see out pretty easily. In fact, the only issue I have with space is, whilst I have enough headroom, there is this thick bulge that comes out of the headliner, and it actually intrudes quite far into the passenger space. So if I sit up in the center of the seat, whilst I have enough sort of vertical headroom, the side of my hair brushes along this area. So if you're tall, that may be an issue. Now I can get past this by reclining the seats, which also reclines in 2 stages, which is nice, and it gets past that issue. But if you're tall, just know you may have that problem. In terms of amenities, rear seat passengers should be very happy. There are 2 fast-charging 2.1 amp USB-A type sockets to keep everything charged. The rear outboard seats are also heated. 2 map pockets. The door bins are also large enough to take regular style bottles. The quality of the back is also emphasized from the front, so the rear stitching and the soft touch materials comes through. The rear outboard armrest has 2 additional cup holders, and as mentioned before, the rear seats reclined. So for long journeys, everyone should be pretty happy. Around the back, our Sport model has an electric tailgate, and you can open it up in all the ways you would expect. You can use the button on the tailgate, the button on the key fob, but new for this generation is a sensor behind the Subaru logo. So just cover it with your arm, and the tailgate opens. Really handy if you're coming back with heavy shopping. They've also switched to regular style electric struts, which is better instead of that sort of metal arm that's stuck from the side. So the tailgate opens faster and higher as well. I also like the new cargo blind design. You can get it out of the way, just push it down, and it goes up out of the way so you can get your cargo easily. The Outback has always been very practical, and this new generation is no different. With the rear seats up, you can expect 522 liters of space, which is more than pretty much every other SUV in its segment. And whilst the space is large, they've also used it very well. There are 2 shopping bag hooks, 1 on each side. There are 8 cargo tie-down hooks, netting to store your loose items, and the classic Subaru unique selling point, a full-size spare wheel. All right, now we're on the road. Let's see how the Outback drives. Now I'm going to address the first thing on your mind probably, which is the engine. This is the 2.5 litre unit. The amount of power this engine has is the dictionary definition of adequate. It's not going to excite you, and it's not going to frustrate you at the same time. For 90% of people, I think they'll be okay with it. A bit more shove low end would have been nice. You do have to rev it a bit to get it going, but otherwise for day-to-day driving, it's okay. This powertrain is basically exactly the same as the Forester. Same 2.5 and a CVT. But the CVT in the Outback, I feel, is a lot more refined. It's nowhere near as loud and as gruff feeling in the Forester, and it's actually quite smooth. You don't get that rubber banding effect you sometimes get with CVT transmissions, and it is very smooth because it doesn't have to change gear. The only time it gets quite loud is if you really floor it. That's where you can hear everything come to life, the engine and the gearbox, and that's when it can get a little loud. But for most driving, it's okay. So we're going to go on the motorway, and that's where we can test out all of the Outback's safety and driver assistance features, which there is a lot. The suspension tuning also hits just the right balance between comfort and sportiness, so it doesn't roll over in corners, but it's not so rigid that you feel every single bump. The chassis is tuned very well. Okay, now let's go up to speed. So now we are on the freeway. We're gonna set cruise control. That's done, set, okay. So it's found the car in front of me. New for the Outback is not just lane keep assist, but lane centering assist. So it keeps the car in the center of the lane versus the older systems where it waits for you to pretty much leave the lane before it intervenes. This is pretty much level 2 autonomy type stuff. The car is keeping its distance, it's also keeping in the lane. So for me, all I have to do is just hold the steering wheel and the car really does the rest. So it makes long distance journeys really comfortable. You can set how vigorously the car accelerates when adaptive cruise control is on, all the way from eco, where it does it very gently, to dynamic, which I have on, which actually picks it up quite quickly. The Outback eyesight system, or Subaru's eyesight system, is probably the best in the business. It uses 2 cameras at the front, and it does a very good job in terms of centering and finding out where the lines are. Something I'm not a big fan of is this start-stop system. It's quite violent in the sense that it jolts the car when it restarts. So in traffic, I find myself turning the system off. One trick Subaru pulled out of BMW's playbook are these indicator stalks, in the sense that when you flick them up, they don't stay there. They return back to the center position. Not a fan. You have to take some time to get used to it, because you push it up, you expect it to stay there, and it falls. And you want to cancel it, so you push it back down, but then that activates a right-hand signal, so you have to try to sort of get it just so it goes down one click. Not a fan. There's a little graphic in the car in the center for the driver assistance systems, and when you put your foot on the brake, it lights up all the brake lights. It's a little thing. It's cute. In terms of steering feel, it's quite nice. It is light, as these sort of cars should be. As it's electric power steering, there's not a whole lot of feel that comes through, so I wouldn't call it direct. But the steering ratio is quite quick, so you don't need to turn the steering wheel a lot in order for the wheels to move in that direction. It's not sporty, although this car doesn't need to be. It needs to be a comfortable cruiser, and that's exactly what it is. What did you think of the Outback? As always, let us know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to make sure you're notified when a new video comes up. Drive safe, and I'll see you soon. Just cover it with your arm, and it should open.